Welcome to the Cinematologist Podcast. In Berlin, Part 2. I'm Neil Fox, and joining me sadly for the last time here face-to-face for a while is Dario Linares. Hello, Dario.
Hello, Neil. How you doing? Yes, it's a bittersweet moment now where I'm just on the way to the airport, and but it was a great day yesterday.
Yeah,
really nice. Couple of films, nicely out for dinner, lots of taping, discussion about the podcast going forward, nice news maybe for things going forward. So just a great day all round, and I've had a great time while I've been here, and just it's a reminder of going to different events and the things that we can do around the podcast. It's all about what it is in terms of the taping and getting it out there, but really it's about kind of meeting up and meeting people and discussing and just reminding ourselves why we do what we do and why we're interested in cinema as a way of talking, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's great.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a really, really positive day, really fun, good movies, lots to talk about, and then kind of having an outlet and sort of knowing that people are listening, in different places. I had a nice moment yesterday with someone who listened to our podcast last year and said, that amazing that no one else was kind of podcasting from Berlin, and was glad that we were back doing this season as well. So it's kind of it was really encouraging, and just a good day, without being too self-aggrandizing. It was a really good day. Kind of a good reminder of why we did set this thing up almost 5 years ago. This week maybe was our first episode.
Could be.
So this could be like literally the 5th year anniversary of this thing, which we were kind of reminded of yesterday, which was nice.
Awesome. So we so this is the start of your odyssey now for the next few days. You've got a few things to see. I think we've already had reports of certain films that you're going to see, and some people have liked, some people have disliked, polarizing stuff. But yesterday we saw a couple of films. We saw 3 films yesterday, actually. So maybe we can sort of just go over the. Let's wait for that. So maybe we can just have a chat about those. I suppose we should start really with Kelly Reichardt, because I talked a lot about that on the first episode. But what did you? I know you were really looking forward to it. What did you make of it?
Really loved it. Yeah, and it was one of the 2 films that I really wanted to see in terms of filmmakers that I knew that I was kind of excited about their work, and really didn't disappoint. I thought it was beautiful, and just kind of when we sort of talked about it before, he was sort of saying about where it sits in the competition and how assured it feels in terms of compared to maybe like the Hong Sangsoo, which is equally assured. I don't get me wrong, but Hong has a very kind of achievable sensibility that he's always kind of going, very prolific. But this felt like Kelly just being Kelly, like I know her. Kelly being Kelly Reichardt being absolutely in control of the material, and just I thought it was sweet and moving and really funny and really kind of political in the best way. And I think all 3 of the films that we saw yesterday were really assured in terms of the social context that they were working in, and the Reichardt was just really, really good on kind of how complicated capitalism is historically and contemporarily, but also how it's connected to kind of basic human desire, which we kind of know, but when you sort of see it in a film that kind of has a historical context, which is, First Cow is essentially how capitalism. It was funny actually. What I thought of was I think a couple of episodes ago you said like she should be talked about on a par with like
Coen Brothers or
Paul Thomas Anderson. And I was like, well, this is her There Will Be Blood. This is her kind of American myth origin story, kind of like Meets Colour, but much more kind of direct about how an idea builds into what becomes this monster machine of kind of capitalism, really smartly without ever being didactic.
But it's not anti-capitalist per se, isn't it? It's very subtle, because it's kind of like, this is what people do to survive. They exchange, whether it's labour or time. But even at the very origins of capitalism, there were still the people who have the capital and the people who want the capital, and the ones who have it will do anything they can to suppress and exploit the ones who don't. You know?
Yeah. And how you just want to get a rung above.
Yeah.
Not even other people. That's something that sort of comes in later, but just above where you are.
Yeah.
And how you can do that without being too. Without harming people into any way, it's very kind of singular, and it was just, it reminded me very much of Old Joy in terms of the dynamics of the friendship, and just this kind of this really, really interesting relationship between two men, and their friendship and partnership as it kind of grows. But the film it kind of most called to mind was Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man.
Right.
For me, nothing like it tonally, or but. Both have Gary Farmer in kind of doing great kind of comedic roles. Both have a William Blake connection, and also really on the edges of the New West, and kind of just the reality of building a town, building a civilization, building a system in a place, that's got colonial aspects, and but it's just got kind of day-to-day mucky. This is how we kind of do the existence kind of thing, and they both felt very connected to that. So I'd love to watch this in a double bill with Dead Man.
Right.
Loved it. And then in the Friedrichstadt Palace, which we're just over the road from now,
which is an amazing cinema.
which I'd never been in before. So what incredible
massive,
space.
isn't it?
Incredible place to see a film.
Yeah.
Particularly one like that, which is it's exciting, isn't it? For cinephiles to come and see one of the great directors' work premiering in Europe in this. It felt like this is how it should be done. And we sort of talked about, do you watch these films in these places? Because eventually you're going to see this one. Yeah. But then you're watching it and you're like, no, this is how I want to see this.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. So then have we talked about Hong Sang-soo on?
We did, we did. We did it on the end of your, on the start of your one. We talked about it.
So we talked about the Hong Sang-soo, obviously, which we both loved. But then yesterday afternoon we saw the Eliza Hittman.
That's right. Yeah.
And that was called. Let me get the title right. Rarely. No. Sorry. Let me do that again. Never. Rarely. Sometimes. Always.
Yeah.
There we go.
There you go.
Which was an extremely raw, intimate, brutal portrayal of a young girl who goes through an abortion, and it's. In a way, that's kind of it, isn't it? Really,
That's it.
But I mean, obviously, there's a very clear kind of context and setting. So she's from a small American town and goes to an abortion clinic in this town, and there's an illusion that they give her the wrong information. You know?
And because it's not an abortion centre, isn't it?
It's not.
It's a family centre.
There's that moment where they play her this god awful video, and it's like obviously the woman. The woman there is obviously very anti-abortion, and clearly that's the agenda of the place that she's in.
Yeah.
But anyway, she decides that she does want to have an abortion, but they have to go to New York. And when she gets to New York, she discovers that she's not 10 weeks pregnant; she's 18 weeks pregnant. So anyway, it's all around these obstacles that are in the way. And some of them are obvious procedural, social, but then weighing down on this is the sort of portrayal of her relationships, basically with patriarchal society, I suppose. It's not with individual men, because we don't know who the father is, but it starts in the school, and there's sort of these sort of social. There's this one moment where you can see there's sort of tensions between her and the boys.
She's slut-shamed, isn't she?
Yeah, basically,
and then kind of gets a small revenge in a diner, and then is just trying to do this thing that she feels like she wants to and needs to do. She's a 17-year-old girl, and her cousin kind of take this trip, and it is about how hard it is to do that in America, but also kind of explicitly about just how hard it is to kind of do anything in the patriarchal society if you're a woman, particularly a vulnerable woman, and these are vulnerable women as well. All women kind of have that obstacle, but this is very much about this huge thing that this person needs to do, and can't.
There's no help.
There's no help apart from when she gets to
New York. There is, but so there's a little comment there about the sort of differences in America.
What's interesting is she gets there and there's the help, but then there's the fact of the matter. There's the medical procedure, which causes its own problems, because she needs to stay and it ends up staying 2 nights, and they haven't got enough money, you know, and they weren't planning it. They had no idea. There's no help to, you know, there's no support in Pennsylvania to go on that trip. There's just no mechanism for it.
And the never, rarely, sometimes, always of the title is this multiple choice answer that she's got to give to the counsellor when she's in New York. And this woman's a very nice woman, but clearly she's mandated to ask these questions. Yeah. And like many of the films I've seen at Berlin this year, there's a central sequence which is very key, which is this counsellor meeting that she has to have. And in that, you start to get a sense of the gravity of her kind of like sexual history and the sort of abuses that have gone on in that, and it's all through just the prism of these 4 questions, or four answers to the questions that are coming. Yeah,
and it's it's a young actress who plays the lead character, her first film role, and it's a one shot. We just see her face and we hear the counsellor asking the questions. It's an extraordinary scene.
Yeah, it is,
because it tells you so much. There's no answers, but it tells you so much. Like you say, it alludes to so much of her history and her awakening to what she took as routine and she took as her life, what it actually is, and whether it's been buried or was not really. Yeah, she wasn't able to understand it or articulate it. It kind of comes to the surface. Yeah. And then, we were sort of talking about it at dinner last night. And then after that sequence, there's 2 or 3 tiny moments where the counsellor spends the procedure with her. Yeah. And she just does these tiny little physical gestures that show that she's kind of just looking after her in a way that you can just tell she's never been looked after. And she's got a mum who kind of is worried about where she is, but has got 3 other kids and a deadbeat dad. But there's these tiny gestures. It was just absolutely devastating. And I thought it was again another kind of filmmaker with an idea of what they wanted to do. Yeah. And I thought she accomplished it beautifully.
It's and just on the gestures thing, because I think that's the counterpoise of the movie in terms of formally. So there's these little gestures between the counsellor and her, as you rightly say, but then the way that they encounter this on the bus. They encounter this male character, and there's this one moment where they shoot. He kind of taps one of them on the shoulder, and it's shot in close up on the hand tapping, and it evokes this sort of this sense of encroachment that is there from the male characters. I mean, there's no sympathetic men in this film at all. We were discussing this a little bit last night, and whether it's absolutely in the service of what this movie is. The fact that there is no one. I mean, even the guy on the bus, he's not a complete, he's not completely horrible, but he's on the spectrum of being, every male in this film is horrible.
He has an agenda. He wants to, manipulate the situation for his own ends. He thinks he's just being, charming and a bit forward in terms of, this girl he meets,
But everything from the men is invasive.
Absolutely.
And then you have the counterpoise with that, with the women who are actually, helping. So it's that.
And then there's that lovely gesture. There's another gesture as well, isn't there, towards the end, where the girl who's going through the abortion kind of finds her friend again, who's kind of gone off to get some money. Sure. And then there's a lovely little gesture there where she meets her, and you just, it's full of those tiny things which feel really.
And there's the makeup scene as well. There's sort of little moments of that. Yeah. So it's, I mean, we were just talking on the way over about this film has been picked up, and it's not an easy watch. It's a hard watch, but sometimes the question of where the audience is a moot one, because films like this should have an audience, but again, it's not a sort of Saturday night movie. It's a very important, and it's got a political agenda, and I don't know, how it's going to play in America, for example. I mean, you can see it's the kind of film that will be protested. You know what I mean? It's that kind of. In certain areas, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it was strange, wasn't it? We were in the press screening, and I said to you earlier, like when it came up, it was a Universal logo leader, and it's BBC Films. Yeah. So there's heavyweight investment behind it. Yeah. And the Universal thing kind of surprised me. I was like, where are they going to put this? And are they going to go out and kind of get behind it in places that is going to cause a conversation? Yeah. And it really should, because it's such a it's a film that is really, it's about something so obvious and simple, really. Yeah. A woman's right to choose, a woman's right to do what she wants with her own body, and the inability to do that in America, outside of New York, literally outside of, pretty much now. And it's so, are they going to go out and have that conversation? Yeah. So I'm really, really interested to see
where it goes.
And I hope that it finds an audience, because I think that, and it's great to see them saying, actually, getting behind a young woman filmmaker. This is her third feature. And kind of putting that kind of weight behind her and saying this is an important piece of work. So, hopefully it'll have some kind of release, because it's. You sort of said I never want to see it again, but because it's a grueling watch. Yeah. But it's it's really, really, really well made. And necessary. It is a kind of necessary gruelingness in terms of. But there's so much cinematic to admire in it as well. It doesn't feel. Yeah, it doesn't feel like you're just being preached at. The performances
it'd be
are really
an interesting companion piece to the assistant as well. You know what I mean? Different sort of spectrums of that, and kind of shot similarly, I would say. A little bit. There are maybe the assistant was much kind of more clinical, whereas this is sort of raw and handheld and stuff. But interesting.
Yeah, exciting to see what happens there.
Okay, so you have got now a few films that you're going to see. You've got some interviews to do. So what can people look forward to on the rest of this episode?
So they're going to hear a little bit about me talking about White Riot, which is a documentary about rock against racism in the late 70s, which I'm seeing today. And I'm writing that up for the Quietus, so that'll be that's a good one. My music doc hit of the festival will take place today. A young British filmmaker as well, so looking forward to seeing that. And then the very divisive Siberia tonight. Tsai Ming-Liang, hopefully the Sally Potter, and Fontaine's Nightshift, and then a King Vidor. They're this huge King Vidor retrospective, which I'm going to catch. And then I've got an interview straight after here with filmmaker Irene Gutierrez, who made this film Entre Perro Y Lobo from Cuba, which I saw before the festival, which is really great. So I'm going to sort of meet her in a bit and chat. So plus anyone I can grab,
stick a microphone in their face.
Pretty much, Will you be on the podcast? And now we know that everyone loves a podcast.
Yes.
No one is safe from my roaming mic. So there'll be lots of recollections and thoughts from different places.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Thanks for being good company, sharing a great day, and look forward to catching up when I'm back in Blighty.
Cool.
I see a spot. I guess my plug right there, right between the lily pads. Let it sit, and I play the lure. Make it dance. Make it look like something he wants, something he's hungry for, then bang!
I find myself sitting on a window ledge down an alleyway just over the road from Hansa Studios, the famous recording studios in Berlin where Bowie recorded his Berlin trilogy. And I'm looking at a picture of David as I record this, which is the first time I'm recording for the podcast since Dario left yesterday. And it's been a strange 24 hours since then. I mean, it's been a strange Berlinale for me in general. It's come at a time when I'm extremely busy and stressed out and kind of confused at work. Some kind of strange personal issues going on in my life has left me kind of flailing around a lot, to be honest with you, and struggling with kind of managing a lot of things and working out what is important and what matters. And I am always buoyed by the fact that the podcast is a kind of perennial source of goodness and in my life, and is really valuable and worth looking at. There's some weird music coming from somewhere, I'm not sure where it is. Maybe a gym nearby. So it's Berlin has been interesting, and I've been more tired than normal at a kind of festival. I don't always sleep very well at when I'm traveling nowadays, but it's been good. It's I think as I kind of approach the last couple of films, I don't think it's been the same. I don't want to say good, because the quality of the films I've seen, I think, has been really strong. I guess there's nothing that stands out like Bait did last year, but obviously that was a a kind of unique experience, but nothing quite like The Souvenir, I guess, from a British perspective, and nothing like Amazing Grace so far, which was just a euphoric. And I don't like comparing and saying, oh, last year was better, but it is interesting to kind of take the temperature of the films that you've seen and the kind of the vibe of the festival. And a lot of the films seem really good, solid, interesting, but there is a sense of slowness and a sense of taking time and a sense of deliberation that's kind of been in a lot of the films I've seen, some of which I've covered with Dario and some of which I'll kind of get to. One of those I saw this morning, which was the new Tsai Ming-Liang, and then I met a friend for coffee and he said, did you enjoy it? And I said, I'm not sure. Was it good? And actually, no, he said, was it good? And I said, I'm not sure, because it's hard to say. It's a very dreamlike film. It's a very sad film. It's obviously beautifully composed because Tsai Ming-Liang is a great filmmaker. But I don't know how I feel about it yet. I'm going to kind of do a fuller recap later on once it's sat with me for a while. I did come out feeling like I felt last year with the Angela Shanelek, where it was clear from the walkouts and from the general tone that a lot of people had just dismissed it as slow, kind of portentous, whatever. But I think that's to do it a disservice. And I just enjoyed sitting in the press conference afterwards, listening to Tsai Ming-Liang and Li Kangsheng, his lead actor of many, many years, talk. And even though I couldn't understand what they were saying, because I didn't take the translated headphones, I just thought it'd be nice to sit in the room with them and just kind of soak up that experience and think about the relationship I have to the films that the two of them have made over a number of years, and which I've only come to recently. So I'll talk a bit about the film a bit later on in a different section. Last night I saw a film that could not be called kind of slow and quiet and anything else, and that's Abel Ferrara's Siberia, which I absolutely loved. And I don't know if I loved it because it was such a contrast to everything else, or because all of the students that I came on the trip with from Falmouth University hated it. And I like to be contrarian sometimes as a teacher, but it was genuinely thrilling and messy, and it is self-indulgent, it is pretentious, but it's also very knowing, and it does, there are several sequences where it kind of takes the mick. And what was really enjoyable about it was kind of being reminded over the last couple of years. I've spent time with filmmakers like Nicholas Winding Refn and his archive project, but also kind of thinking about different types of cinema and remembering that Ferrara is a singular voice, and he likes to provoke and he likes to challenge himself within a film and also the audience, and this is a challenging film in many ways. But William Dafoe is brilliant in it, and playing a man on the edges of the earth and on the edges of sanity, kind of reckoning with his own humanity, his real past and a kind of imagined past, I think, as well, and a cultural past, and all sorts of things going on. And it's a stunning looking and really kind of confident film that asks a lot of the audience, but doesn't care if you're on board or not. And I think as well it was seeing Ferrara in competition, having known that he's had a quiet few years in terms of releases that have gone under the radar somewhat. I'm a big fan of Pasolini, the film he made with Dafoe, one of the films he made with Dafoe. But this felt like, as with many of the films, and Dario and I have talked about this on Dario's episode, there has been a kind of interesting angle to the competition where there's a real mix of filmmakers in there, and there isn't a kind of set tone or a set style. It's kind of anyone's game, which I think is a bold move for a first year, and hopefully they'll kind of keep that confidence up in coming years. So Siberia, I'd be interested to see if it makes an appearance. There's loads of people just coming out of Hansa Studios over the road, but no one famous that I recognise. No one's trying to get the Bowie vibe from that. They might have just done a tour, who knows. So Siberia was interesting. I think for the end of this section I'm just going to lead into, because another film that a lot of the students saw was Irene Gutierrez's Cuban film Entre. I've been trying to rehearse this for days and then just so tired I just got it wrong. Entre Perro y Lobo, Between Dog and Wolf, which is the story of 3 Cuban revolutionary soldiers who fought in the Angolan conflict that Cuba supported in the early 60s, and kind of living in the jungle, training in the jungle, waiting in perpetual hope and need for the revolution to kind of reignite in terms of their skill set. And I think Dario's seen some of it. He's going to watch all of it before we do our recap. So I'll talk more about the film with him. But it was I really liked the film, and the students found it interesting. And it's a very South American doc narrative hybrid film. And as listeners know, I am kind of drawn to Cuban cinema, and I found it really, really interesting. I had the pleasure of talking to the filmmaker Irene Gutierrez here at the festival, and let's go to my interview now. You're pleased with how it went?
Yes, sure, of course, because the film was a project. It was here in the dock station, so I'm really pleased this film festival to support the film from the beginning.
Great. Mm-hmm. So, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's really nice to talk to you. I saw the film last week, and I really loved it. I think it's fantastic. I guess we'll start at the beginning. How the project started, how you came to the story of these men.
I studied in film school in San Antonio de los Baños, where all the teachers, cookers, everyone between 50 and 60 years old, they were in Angola's war. So it was a generation topic. And afterwards, I wanted to do a film in a jungle, because I made my first feature in Havana. So I want to change the cartography of the film and do something like a more handheld camera, like more documentary. So at the end, I went to Sierra Maestra and I made a long research with different veterans, and at the end I decided to work with Estevita, Santana and Miguel, because for me it was like a perfect triangle or triptych. They conform themselves, this kind of combination between body, mind and heart. So this is strength, but emotional, but also this kind of mental thing. So that was the idea, to work with them and talk about the whole generation through them and their stories and their war memories, and also to make it wider and talk about this feeling to belong to a common project which is bigger than yourself and than an individual. And these feelings are still untouched there in Sierra Maestra. They feel like they belong to the revolution and they are ready to defend this idea or ideas.
Even though that in a kind of reality and a practical sense, the world has moved away from those, which I think the film captures. What do you do with the soldiers who fight on either side, like for a revolution, or like when the actual fighting is done, because these men are, like you say, so tied to it? Is that something that you kind of wanted to explore from the start, or was that something that emerged from the process?
Both of them. That's a good question, because we have like a map, kind of sort of screen, right? Or like a script.
A script, yeah.
And at the end, during the process, we have to walk, climbing the mountain for 2 hours every day. So at the end, in between, through the walking, we were talking about the way they want to be represented and the training they want to make in order to recover these war memories through the body and not through the words. So at the end, we prepare everything every single day, and we improvise a lot. But the device was the trip, the journey, and also this kind of training without any end. But in between that, everything was improvising day by day. Even the state of mind or the tiredness make its own contribution to the film. This is almost chronological editing. Edited.
It feels natural.
Yeah.
Which adds to that sense of the journey, but the journey has no end.
No,
which I thought
it was
really
just a cinematic device.
Yeah, and it worked. I think it works really well. Could you talk a little bit about how you sort of mentioned it in terms of the relationships between the three, but what that experience was like of kind of spending so much time with these men, and how you sort of saw the film shaping as you were going and getting to know them better in the jungle, I guess.
Oh, I met them a long time ago. So, and even some of the part of the crew, they are the niece and the nephew. So it was very close environment, and they shared the mission in Angola. So they know each other for a long time ago, since 30 years ago. So it was very easy for me to be with them and to continue. Listening their stories through the journey. So at the end, I make this research with a lot of interviews, but some of the interviews I want to keep them for the film. So I recover this kind of testimonies, and they are friends, so that's very easy. They are really good friends. So
it's obviously a very Cuban story, but the way or the decisions that you make to shoot it in the jungle with there's no Havana landmarks, there's no real Cuban landmarks, creates a sense that this could be anywhere in the world. That's obviously a deliberate thing. Was that deliberate at the start, that you felt like that this was a story that had resonances outside of Cuba?
Yes, the idea was to compare the Cuban jungle with the Angola jungle, to be like the jungle little by little. Through the film, it becomes like a mental landscape. That was the idea, to even making this kind of homage to the Cuban Sierra Maestra, which means the starting point of the Cuban Revolution, but also on the other hand to make kind of mental landscape. Could be anywhere because it's a state of mind.
And it could be any time as well.
Yeah.
And what I really loved about the film was how you used the score and the sound to kind of create. It feels very alien and very timeless where they are. You don't know whether they are actually in a real jungle or, like you say, a kind of psychological jungle. And it reminded me of very much, in a weird way, of Monos. Did you see Monos from last year?
Yes, because the sound designer is the same.
Oh well, yeah, that says a lot. But almost kind of the connection between the old men and the young boys and the young girls felt really fascinating. Could you talk a little bit about working with your sound designer in the score? Because I thought that was such a strong cinematic part of the film.
This collaboration with all of us, we met in 2003, and since then we have collaborated together. So we conceive filmmaking as a big family. Otherwise, we couldn't make these kind of difficult things, because it took like 6 years, and the other it took like 5-6 years. So we always have almost the same crew, some variations, and we are very clear about our references, and about the way we want to have this cinematic approach through the cinematography and also through sound design. So it's easy for us because we have seen the same movies, we have the same references, and even books and films, so it's kind of natural, easy going way to make films.
What were some of the reference points that you had for this, you know?
Heart of Darkness.
Okay.
Joseph Conrad, the first, and then kind of war films, and also Soy Cuba.
Is it hard to make films in Cuba without, you know, because Memories of Underdevelopment kind of comes up a lot, and Soy Cuba comes up a lot. Is it how do you feel about those kind of films? You know, is it just that you have to acknowledge them because they're so big, or is it, you know, what do they mean to you on a personal level?
Well, Cuba is full of stories. It's a very it's a place when you can find inspiration in every corner, because people is living out in the streets. The public space become a private space, so it's very easy to access. But on the other hand, we have the difficulties of the budget, because we have just the Film Institute, and we don't have private fundings funds or institutions. So, and also the access, because Sierra Maestra is a military area, so we have to wait for the access almost not 1 year, but almost. It was difficult. But then when we have the access, we have everything, and it's unique country, and it was my first home. Sometimes I was living there for 8 years, so I love the island and its people.
But these are stories that still are very rarely told. Not just the stories of the soldiers in the revolution, but the countryside outside of like the towns, and outside of the musical stories, which are probably the common go-to. So, is that what drew you back? Is kind of wanting to show the world another side of a story that most people think they know or have a kind of a vague idea about?
Yes, the idea after Hotel Nova Isla, my first feature, was like make a very different approach to the island from this countryside. Because Havana is everyone knows Malecon, everyone knows Capitolio, these cars, and but there is a spirit in the countryside that you can feel that the revolution is still alive. They are not in Havana anymore. So I want to portray this contrast in between this feeling of the city to be like like another city, or be in the countryside like a very Cuban way of living, which is untouchable. This is still alive, and they belong to the revolution, and they defend the revolution. So I wanted to portray this spirit, which is being lost little by little, and here we don't have that spirit anymore. To put your individual being in a common collective project. It doesn't happen anymore.
No, and it makes your film both amazingly powerful, but also sad. Like in terms of when you relate it to now, and you can't imagine the bond that these men have and their commitment to this idea. It's really striking, and I guess that comes out of the time that you've spent with those characters and obviously those stories. You mentioned it took you nearly a year to get access to the space. How long were you shooting for?
2 months.
Wow.
In the jungle. Yeah, 2 months.
You feel that in a good way, like you feel the time, and and the sense that this is a landscape that everyone is embedded in. It doesn't feel like you were in there. Did it feel longer than 2 months?
Yes. And it's the end of one generation, and it's kind of say goodbye to this film. It's like a nostalgic approach to this generation we see, which is now getting old, and it will disappear very soon. They are in their 60s, 50s, and they are also forgotten heroes. And nobody knows here what's happening in Angola's war, but this was very important because their mission there, the Cuban intervention in Angola, means the liberation of Namibia, of Angola, and the end of the apartheid. So Mandela, when he could get out from the prison, he went to visit Fidel Castro to say thank you, because you are the only country, non-African country, who came here to help us.
And it's Cuba's a small island. They sent a lot of people.
100,000. 3,800,000 men.
Amazing.
Too much.
Because whole generation. But because of the belief in the ideal and about the revolution as a concept, not just the realities of the Cuban Revolution, but the idea of how countries should revolt and should take control of their own situation. It's an amazing story, and that archive footage sits so well in terms of both the memories of the men. I love the way you use it as their memories, and a flashback but also the memories of a time and memories of an idea. It's really, really beautifully done. When did you have access to that archive? Was that something that kind of formed the start of the project, or did it come later in the editing?
No. I was very clear about using archives because they do have a lot of archives which are unknown for the rest of the world. So they were shooting there, and even some of my teachers in the film school, they were making that kind of images in the middle of the front. They were sound recorders, they were cinematographers, my teachers in the film school. So for me it was a kind of put everything there and say, okay, we have the stories, we have the pictures, we have the music, and we have also these archives which are unknown and inedit. Yeah. The first one is a film of José Masip, a Cuban filmmaker. Angola, Victoria de una Esperanza. It's a documentary, I think, unknown for the rest of it. Was just premiere in Cuba, so. And the other is Ikaik newsreels. I love archives. My last film was just archives. So that's a kind of fetish. Yes, right. And also the idea of portraying major things like macho alpha, but from the weakness, also, no, the doubts and the feeling that they have to keep it going, but sometimes they are not clear, and that doesn't happen in the film of we are clear enough, we are doing that. In this case, doubts and weakness is very important.
Yeah, the physicality is the sense of like we must maintain. Yeah. Because if we stop, we'll never get anything back. Exactly. You know, and that's what that kind of mournful end of life, end of idea thing is. There's a real physicality to the men, you know, which makes you feel that maybe they know that it's not, but there's a reason to do it physically, and there's a reason to go through the routine to stay inside of it that is prolonging them. Because that's all they know, that's their life, and it's in their bodies, and watching the training and how they help. Because it's strange, because at the start of the film, you're like, well, why is he telling him how to do it? They must know how to do it, because they've, and then you say, well, have they done it for so long? Is this a new thing? Because the time thing. But then you realise actually that they're constantly reminding, because they need to keep doing it. They need to stay alive physically, in terms of being able to just stay alive together and moving forward in a kind of physical sense. Yeah, it's really beautiful. And those scenes with the intimacy between the men is just so good. Yeah, and great donkey performances as well. Got some great donkey performances.
Yes, they are great actors. I love to work with them. They're good faces, and these bodies, they are 55 years old and they still are like that. They are training and they feel like they are still young, and this kind of Cuban way of male thing, no? And it's very important to keep this physical thing, like they still believe that they are strong enough.
That's something, as
useful.
Well. Yeah, but also, you were talking about ideas that are we're saying goodbye to. There is also this idea of a man and this idea of a masculinity which feels like is at least trying to be said goodbye to, and they are almost the last image of particular kind of man, this very alpha, very physical, very stoic, dedicated to maintaining a weapon, I suppose, without sort of asking the question of working, how much of it was the masculinity kind of something that you were interested in, not just in a Cuban sense, but in a sense of this image of a man which feels of a different time.
Yes, I like the idea to portray this kind of masculinity from the difficulties of being in this world as a man. For us, it's very difficult, for you also, because you are asked to make certain things that we are not asked for, like be in a war, or like be always ready to defend something, aware, and so for me it's you have to do a lot of things from just for being a man, no, in this world, and that's not easy. So I really appreciate that this masculinity thing is also a difficult way to be here and to respond to this gender thing. You know?
Yeah, and it one of the things that really struck me, which I sort of mentioned earlier, was this idea that, you know, they have been asked to be men in a way, and now that they're just kind of ignored. They're just left because what was asked before is not being asked now. But what do? They can't do anything else. It's, you know, it's sad, but it's also kind of amazing to watch them maintain something that is never going to be called on. And even if there was a war, that it's unlikely that their generation would be called. Could they do the thing? You know, it's really fascinating. Yeah. So I guess that one of the things that kind of comes out of the film is their awareness of that. You know, was that something that you knew at the start that they were aware of, or did you sort of see by watching them do it that was something that they sort of carried with them?
Yes, and I have some stories of, like Miguel. His father was riding a horse. He was 17 years old, and they say, "Father, I'm leaving. I have to go to Angola to a mission, international mission." And his father, on the top of the horse, they say, "Okay, that's the thing you have to do for your homeland. So good luck."
Yeah.
No kiss, no embrace, nothing. On the top of the horse, they say, "Okay, do what you have to do for your country, and you have to demonstrate you are a man."
Yeah.
That's all. That's all. 3 years, 1 year and a half, no, 2 years.
Yeah.
So this is kind of thing of men, you know? No weakness, no kisses, nothing.
No, a very matter of fact.
Yes.
Passing it on, saying this is your duty. Yeah.
And he was not here. You know, it's very young. He's 70 years old.
Yeah, child still.
Child. They say, go there.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of earlier about the, was it Berlin or the dock station had kind of, so how important is it for filmmakers like yourself in terms of what festivals can do to support the making, but then also the release of the film? You know, is it would anyone see the films if it wasn't for places like Berlin?
Probably. I mean, this is very important for us. This kind of support for coming from film festivals, because as you know, the movies this kind of movies like autoral or whatever hybrid films, it's very difficult to sell.
Yeah.
So at the end, this is the way of these films to be seen in the rest of the world. Just film festivals, no theatrical could be, but not. It's just film festivals, and it was very important for me to be here with Dog Station, because we have plenty of mentors, just cleaning up the projects. Say, no, this is Forgotten Heroes film. Don't be like, no, the film is about the resistance. Yeah, okay, but it's Forgotten Heroes. Clean up your mind. So because we want to include everything. So here in Dog Station, you have to pitch the project in front of the people approach to you, say, I like the project, please call to me when it's finished, or I want to put some money. It was very, very important for us.
And it keeps you on track creatively, you're sort of saying there, so that it doesn't become sprawling, because the film is so focused. It's got a real tight idea, which is so well delivered. So yeah, it's interesting to hear you sort of say that comes out of the process of working with partners all around the world almost as well. So yeah, where next? Like, you know, what are you hoping? What are you hoping from this kind of festival journey with the film?
Well, I don't know. Let's see. I am very curious about the Cuban audience for sure, and also we miss these characters be here with us, but we couldn't make it because of the bureaucracy and visas. So let's see. I want to know what opinion have these Cuban people, and also to see what happened with this film in Asia or whatever. And it is a very universal story about this feeling of belonging to this revolution and this collective project. And now it's a moment to think about the next film.
Yeah. Just before we talk about that and finish up, what do you think the reaction will be? Because you mentioned earlier that you know, this is a generation that's you know, you're sort of saying goodbye to, but also maybe an idea as well outside. You know, do you think that you think it will? How do you think people will take it? Do you have an idea or a sense of what people who might have already moved on from these kind of ideas will get from it?
I think that it's a good film for this generation. Maybe for young people, they say, that's a nostalgic point of view. That's a very old way of thinking. Revolution is dying. But for me, it's a clear letter of love of this generation. They built up something important in our recent history. That's my homage to them. Regarding the new generations, I don't know. I'm curious, but that's I feel closer from this generation, 43. So
great. Well, it's a really beautiful film. Kind of gripping in its intimacy, and really loved it. Thank you so much for
thank
talking
you.
to me.
Thank you.
Una máquina, no van a tener uno de por la humilde. Eso es lo que hay que afeitarlo con arena. Con arena lo que hay que afeitar. Parece un chivo a cojo. No. Me cago en la madre de los ojos. Oye, mojaron la medalla y me mojaron así. Me voy de esta tropa, compadre. ¡Coge! ¡Gana de agua! ¡Coge! Esto no lo deberían hacer. No, pero eso me lo gané yo porque mira, parece un bomboncito. Tan bella.
I'm on the move. I'm walking and talking. Just walked past some lovely Keith Haring artwork on what looked like student accommodation, but I don't want to presume. Again, kind of around Potsdamer Platz, and an interesting kind of artistic quarter. It's amazing how Berlin retains so many kind of traditional cultural areas despite massive regeneration. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll be able to see the Keith Haring artwork on the buildings that I shared on there from my trip. So I'm just kind of wandering around. I hope you enjoyed the Irene Gutierrez conversation. It was a real pleasure to talk with her about Cuba and film and revolutionary politics and ideals and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you got something out of that, and hopefully the film will come out. Last year at the festival I saw Baracoa, another kind of Cuban doc narrative hybrid that did really well at festivals, and I think it's still doing really well at festivals. It hasn't had any kind of UK release despite popping up at Sheffield Doc Fest, but hopefully it will make an appearance at some point. We'll kind of flag that up if it does, and the same for Irene's film Entre Perro Y Lobo, Between Dog and Wolf. So I guess I'm kind of doing a lot of these catch-ups all at the same time because I've been, as I sort of mentioned before, in a strange headspace. So just noticing someone taking a picture of something. I can't tell what it is. He's on his haunches. It's I've got no idea what he's taking a picture of. But he's got it in his mind. He knows what he's doing. So let's leave him to it. Another film to catch up on, which one I saw yesterday, which was Rubika Shah's documentary White Riot, which writing up for the Quietus after I record this catch up. So I'll leave that kind of detail to my Quietus review, which I'll link in the show notes. But it's an account of the Rock Against Racism movement, which grew out of the kind of horrible fascist, racist, homophobic kind of climate of late 70s Britain, and the rise of the National Front and this kind of cultural activist response in the form of Rock Against Racism, which was set up to kind of halt the National Front, and how that resulted in a kind of landmark anti-racism concert in Victoria Park, headlined by the Tom Robinson Band and the Clash. And this is the story of the people who set up the movement, just ordinary folks who decided to do something. And it's a really it's a really good story. It does an amazing job of kind of showcasing the potential in a controlled response to, of people, just kind of banding together and seeing something's wrong and wanting to make a difference. It's notably made by a non-white filmmaker, and in many ways, one is that the white people who set up Rock Against Racism they're not presented as heroes. Neither do they present themselves as heroes, or does the film make them out to be heroes. It's a kind of subtle, unsentimental, this is the right thing to do and we did it kind of approach. And also because it introduces, or reintroduces I should say, a very vital voice, which is the British Asian voice from that time. The British Asian community was, horrifically targeted for racist attacks by the National Front, alongside the black communities. But the cultural history suggests that because of punk and reggae, it was a kind of black and white issue, and that kind of British Asians were not necessarily part of it because of the music. And there's a great band called Alienation featured in the film who I'd never heard of, and a kind of a good reminder of just how widespread that kind of hate was, and continues to be. And what's really notable about the film as well is it's not a patronising, wake up and do this now kind of thing. It leaves a lot of the contemporary resonances in the audience's mind just by hoping that they'll see the connection between those times and these times. What was notable as well was that the activism was a labour. It was a physical act that had to be done, and time and labour had to be kind of spent. You had to go to gigs, you had to write letters, you had to put these amazing zines together. There was a solidarity in groups doing that, but also a time spent actually physically writing letters and posting them, and then the correspondence that went back and forth that is very much lost in this kind of immediate world we live in now. That felt very different, and kind of something that almost felt, maybe it's just a nostalgic idea that it worked, but that you need more than just being able to click and send a quick email off here and there. That there has to be some kind of labour involved to kind of really get momentum in a movement, which was really interesting. And then the archive footage of the Lewisham riots and also the Lewisham protests and things like that was stunning, and a reminder that so much now is not, in terms of racism and hate, is not on the streets. It's behind screens, and you don't always know who the people are in your neighbourhood that are, full of hate and targeting people mercilessly. So lots of really great stuff in it. As a music documentary, it's okay. It ticks a lot of the contemporary boxes of music documentaries in terms of its form, but it does a good job, and it's a very, very powerful story, well told. So again, that should see some kind of release, probably on TV, I would guess, but well worth checking out as and when it arrives. So that'll be it for this little check out. One of the other interview that I've done so far, and most likely the only one I'll get to do now. I've really scaled back my interviews this year, if you haven't noticed, so you got more of me, I'm afraid, is with one of the people I spoke to last year, and becoming a good friend of mine, Neil Young, British critic who's based in Vienna, who kind of comes here every year. So this was us catching up about what Neil's seen and his kind of thoughts on the festival, and then there's a couple of interruptions which will nicely lead me into the review that I'll give at the start of the next section. So I hope you enjoy this chat between two Neils. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Neil. Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. It's lovely to see you in Berlin again.
In this torrential downpour that's engulfing the festival and turning it into a underwater paradise.
But today was really nice, or are you just still reeling from
today is pouring with rain. You've been in the cinema for too long. Today was again a heavy downpour.
Was it?
So, yeah.
Okay.
The gods are telling us that Christian Petzold is heading towards the golden fish, if not the golden bear.
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to get the scoop on. Well, yeah, it's no different to Cornwall, which has been raining incessantly and England, which has been raining incessantly for what feels like forever since the Brexit vote.
But it's good for the box office.
It is.
We hope that people are fleeing from their waterlogged residences to find shelter. But here we are in an underground cinema.
We are.
So this is going to be the first one that fills up if the deluge comes.
That's true.
The Kino Arsenal.
Do that thing where you're supposed to touch the floor, or is that fire?
Squelch.
It's fire. Okay. You've just come out. I've just literally seen you leave a cinema. What have you just seen?
I just saw Ostia, which is a film from the 1971 Forum retrospective, which is directed by Città, but is a big project which heavily involved Pier Paolo Pasolini.
Okay.
And since Pasolini soon afterwards, a couple of years later, died in Ostia, it has a certain macabre and ironic aspect to it.
Okay, nice.
So yeah, I'm trying to balance the new and the old at this festival.
Yeah, that's something that I have always said I'd do and failed. But I am going to catch a Vidor on Friday before I leave.
Yeah, it's a very big retrospective of King Vidor because he had a very long and eclectic and very busy filmography until 1959 when it ground to a halt, and he kept going for he was still alive for 30 odd years after that. But Hollywood is a cruel employer, and he couldn't get the money to do it, so he taught actually in the later part of his career, and then he also acted in James Toback's Love and Money. And
you posted something from that, didn't you?
It was very much a kind of mentor figure to younger filmmakers. So the Vidor.
It's an hour-long discussion after, so I'll see you after you're there.
Okay, great.
We're
just in the middle of an interview, so okay. We can take
Outrageous.
it out. We can take it out.
Outrageous.
Yeah, the clue was the microphone, but
it's fine. Don't worry.
That's okay. It's all right. That was our friend Hillary Clinton who's just walked past us there. So
she's mortified now. It's fine. Don't worry.
It's all right. So we'll start again from the beginning.
Lovely. Yeah. So a nice notification that there's an hour-long discussion after. What screening's that?
I have absolutely no idea.
Okay. So good to know.
So yeah. So where were we?
We were talking about King Vidor.
King Vidor, yes.
And
last night in the King Vidor retrospective, I watched Stella Dallas with Barbara Stanwyck, followed by Beyond the Forest with Betty Davis. So
nice.
And both of them on 35mm and good audiences, and what a wonderful cinematic evening. But of course, I also missed the huge excitement of the new film Siberia, which had the premiere and the party and the press conference, which sounds like it was like the event of the Berlinale. Abel Ferrara, after all these years, is still able to burn with the fire of provocation.
Which and I had Undine on my list for tomorrow, but I've swapped it out for Siberia, so I'm going to see Siberia.
It's definitely, the festival has taken a little while to catch fire, but it seems as though Abel Ferrara has ignited something with his apparently deeply personal and deeply bizarre. It's been described as his version of Tarkovsky's Mirror meets his version of Malick's The Tree of Life. Okay. Which, given Malick, given the sort of private lives of those three individuals, to navigate the subconscious of Abel Ferrara, I think is going to be a bit spicier than that of Tarkovsky and Malick, with no disrespect to those eminent individuals. Yeah, I've recommended it to my students, and now I'm wondering whether I should. You will be had up in the court for corruption of minors. Good. Well, in a cinematic sense at least. Before the beak. You said you've seen one. Is that the Undine? Is that the only film I've seen in the competition? Is Undine by Christian Petzold, which, one of the... Are you a Petzold fan? Yeah, I mean, he has become a friend over the years, so it's not a film that I can really write about. I wasn't the world's biggest fan of Transit, which was his last film, which everybody... Everybody seemed to think it was a career peak, and of course I was like, it's more like a nadir. But for me, he's bounced back a bit from that. But for others, it might be that he's... retreated because Transit was a bit more experimental. But he's working again with Paula Beer and Franz Rogowski, who are his current actors of choice, and always a fascinating filmmaker. And as a film about Berlin, I thought it was particularly interesting because there's a very heavy Berlin urban planning element to this film. I've heard, very exciting. On the one level, you have this... supernatural, underwater, mysterious, romantic thing going on, and on the other hand, you have this very, very, in a way, austere or intellectual approach to how Berlin has evolved as a city. Berlin was swamps and marshes. So again, I don't want to give too much away in the film, but the fact that there's this aspect of water sprites and things emerging from the water. If you've seen the Neil Jordan film Undine with Colin Farrell, and of course there is a whole subgenre of German films about this Undine myth, which this film is dialoguing with, and of course, not having seen any of those, I am slightly at sea, shall we say. Indeed. Loving the water metaphors. Oh yeah. How are you feeling about the new Tsai Ming-Liang? Because Stray Dogs was high on your
favourites of the decade.
Yeah, it was my actual number one favourite of the entire decade, and I was just thinking, a jury in Venice decided to give the Golden Lion to Sacro Gra by Gianfranco Rosi, which is a nice film, but I would say was rather dwarfed by Stray Dogs. Yeah. I mean, of course, Tsai Ming-Liang announced his retirement in a sort of semi-joking Ken Loach-y, I'm not really retired sort of way, and has kept making films since then. This film is 2 hours and 7 minutes, reportedly without dialogue, and he has been making sort of filmic things in the last few years. So I think this is much more of a experimental approach rather than necessarily a full-blown sort of feature film. So we might pause just for 1 second.
No problem.
How are you? May I introduce Neil?
Hello.
James.
Nice to meet you, James.
Of Maggie's farm.
Hello.
Discussing. So we're just doing an interview. Are you hanging around here for a second? Yeah. I'll come and see. Yeah. Okay. So anyway,
you're in high demand.
What can I say? Hillary Clinton followed by James Benning.
Indeed.
So yes,
Hillary and Maggie.
Where were we? We were at Tsai Ming-Liang.
Yeah.
With of course his actor and muse Li Kangsheng in one of the leading roles. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. But for me, I took Stray Dogs as his farewell to cinema, and he's an artist who wants to continue expressing himself. So when I go and see a Tsai Ming-Liang film now, I'm not like, oh, maybe it's going to be like Stray Dogs or as good as Stray Dogs. As I say, if you make Stray Dogs, you can go off and be a fish and chip man for the rest of your life. Nothing wrong with being a fish and chip man, but it's like, what more do we want from him after Stray Dogs? And the fact that he's still giving us things, no matter what they turn out to be, I think we should be grateful for that.
Absolutely, yeah. That's kind of exactly how I felt with the fact of the chance to see something on the big screen, in a kind of festival setting was what was exciting, regardless of what it is. Because, I came to him quite late, so kind of missed all those kind of opportunities.
And I did actually speak to somebody who has seen it, and they were actually saying it is very, very good.
Great.
So, but as I say, hopefully he's trying something new, because the whole point, he's a director in his 60s now. Yeah. And Ferrara, who would have thought that Ferrara would unleash a, phantasmagoric exploration of the human soul? So, what are film festivals for if not to give filmmakers support to go in new directions? And as I say, Petzold going romantic supernatural, again, he's in his 60s. The 60s are the new 20s, so this is the...
Which is exciting for us as we are closer to that.
Hopefully we'll get there, and then Manuel de Oliveira shows us we've got another 40 years after that. So,
absolutely. Well, that seems like a nice place to end. I was going to ask you about the odds, because always fascinating, even when I'm not at a festival, to follow you tracking. Is that just a kind of thing that you enjoy in terms of getting not through the festival, but kind of adding a different layer it's nothing to do with actually seeing the films?
Well, yeah, and also, people talk about this is a front runner, this has a chance, this is an outsider, but odds are actually numerical probabilities, and it's all percentages and things like that. So I like to sort of take that approach and sort of try to second guess the jury, try to sort of look at the history of the festival, look at all the possible things that might happen. But juries are very strange beasts, and they can pull strange surprises, especially at Venice. Berlin, maybe not so much. So here are my favourites since the competition was announced was Kelly Reichert's First Cow, which on the one hand people say, it won't win because it premiered months ago at other festival. I don't think Jeremy Irons is going to be bothered about that. and on the other hand, Kelly Reichardt, who's again a director in her late 50s, she's at that point in her career, and everybody loves the film. Yeah. So that's the thing, that you've got to look for a thing that's going to appeal to a wide range of jury. But as I say, I'm ready to be stunned by something unexpected coming from the sidelines, which is what you want. But at the moment, Kelly Reichardt, I think the bear will go to the cow.
Great, lovely to see you as always.
Thank you, Neil.
See you soon.
Good to see you at the pictures.
Back in the hotel now. I have just filed my review for The Quietus of White Riot. So, yeah, that was a fun one to write up. Hope you liked the chat there with Neil. It's always nice to catch up with Neil when I'm away, particularly in Berlin. It's weird saying Neil, isn't it? Because I'm called Neil. So t'other Neil is always good value. So hopefully you enjoyed that little chat about what he's been up to and his thoughts on things. And you may have noticed there that we were interrupted a couple of times, and I did say that they would be kind of relevant to the next recollection I wanted to do. So the first interruption was Kevin James Emerson's producer. He's a filmmaker that I've really got into recently thanks to Mubi and a piece that I read in Sight and Sound, and really kind of fascinating documentary filmmaker. And I met him briefly after the chat with Neil, and kind of he was there presenting his film that was about to screen in the program that his producer, who Neil knows, and Neil knows Kevin as well, was kind of saying about the long Q&A and that. So it was nice to meet him. That was a nice little moment. And the other interruption was a filmmaker called James Benning, whose film Maggie's Farm was premiering here in Berlin. And he was a filmmaker I also kind of heard about recently when reading a piece in Sight and Sound. So his name popping up in the program kind of made me think, I'll check that out. So this was Maggie's Farm was my first James Benning film, and it's a documentary, ostensibly 24 shots of kind of fragments of Cal Arts, which is where he's been a professor for a long time. And the film is apparently, according to Neil, his quasi resignation letter. Basically, he's kind of stepping down and kind of leaving Cal Arts. And it's a kind of meditation on space and place. The first third of the film is entirely outside, kind of logs and greenery and trees and fields, and then the second section moves inside, corners of doors and walls and lights, and there's a strange I don't know what this says about universities, but a kind of long sequence of a waste bin just in the frame. And then the third section of the film is kind of inside and outside, kind of man meets nature, not versus, but meets nature. So back outside, but kind of corners of buildings and walls and doors and kind of aspects of the man-made kind of in relationship with the nature, the natural world that Cal Arts kind of occupies. And I watched it as a screener in my office at Falmouth University a week ago today, and it was kind of really contemplative and meditative experience, watching a very measured, very composed, very quiet film of an arts facility, an arts education institution, thinking about my own job, thinking about my work, thinking about filmmaking, thinking about teaching, thinking about the spaces that we do those things in, and the idea of the university and what it is to teach art and in any place. So it was a fascinating film that made me think a lot about my own life. Hard to judge it as a film because I've not seen any of his other work, and it's a very specific type of filmmaking. And according to Neil and some others, like the 16mm work that he did, that he's kind of most famous for, is where to start. So I might kind of head back there. So if anyone's got any other James Benning kind of favourites, then let me know, and I'll kind of keep them in mind for when they pop up in different places. Not a filmmaker I guess I'll be rushing out to see, but definitely glad that I've had an experience of his work, having read about it recently. So that was Maggie's Farm, which was one of the screeners I saw before the festival, along with Irene's film, which you've heard the interview from, and which I'll talk to Dario about in the final section of the podcast. So this is Thursday afternoon. I am heading out for dinner and then heading to see Anne Fontaine's Nightshift, which I know very little about, but I liked the still, and liked that it was called Nightshift and then brackets police. And I'm trying to see as many films by female filmmakers as possible, as always, at this festival. So I look forward to that, and I will kind of and I will update you on my thoughts on that, along with the Tsai Ming-Liang, which has been kind of growing in my mind since I saw it. I'm really thinking about it a lot, and excited to kind of share thoughts on that. So I'll do that tomorrow morning in what will be the last missive from Berlin before I head home tomorrow evening, after seeing a King Vidor silent film, The Sky Pilot, which I'll talk about with Dario when I'm back in England and we're wrapping up this episode. So thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.
Putain, mais qu'est-ce qu'il fout? Bon, allez, ça suffit maintenant, va-t'en, file. On te laisse partir, on dira rien. On dira rien. Attends, tiens, prends. Là, voilà. Ok, pars. Allez, va-t'en, casse-toi. Allez. Casse-toi.
Go.
Voilà.
Go. Go. Okay, go.
It's Friday morning. It's the last day. I travel back to the UK tonight, and I'm just wandering around really before my last screening of the day. I'm sat on a bench in Tiergarten in the park, overlooking the Japanese embassy, and just taking a break really to sit. It's lovely and fresh, and yeah, just wanted to kind of catch up with my thoughts on the films from yesterday. So yesterday I saw Tsai Ming-Liang's new film, Rizi, which translates as Days, and I saw Anne Fontaine's Nightshift, or Police, depending on where you see. And yeah, it was strange in the sense that both films had massage scenes that were very key to the kind of emotional gateway, we'll say, to the characters. Quite different, but it was odd to kind of start the day at 9 a.m. with a massage scene and to end it about 9 p.m. with a massage scene. So yeah, that was a notable theme. I wonder how many other massages have appeared in movies at this year's Berlinale. I guess we'll never know. Well, we might know. I'm sure it's quite easy to do that actually. You just have to watch all the films. And yeah, so I'll start with Nightshift, which was really it was good. It was a solid movie. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. It's fine, and yeah, I enjoyed it. It's the story of 3 police officers who you kind of get a little bit of insight into their lives, and they are tasked with taking a detainee to the airport after a fire in a detention centre. So it's a character who's being sent back to Tajikistan, and it becomes clear that, well, not clear, but the sense emerges that he's not really done anything wrong, and he'll be killed if he goes home. And then it's the kind of the moral quandary at the heart of these 3 very different police officers, and it's a film that does a lot of things well, but a few things quite clunky. Some of the writing, particularly as the film goes on, is really good. You know, there's some of the way it subverts the characteristics it sets up in the early part are interestingly played out. It never it never really marries its politics and its plot. You know, it's kind of going for a procedural drama, you know, kind of good solid genre movie, but also there's a lot of politics at play about France, because it's a French movie, about the police force, about immigration, and lots of other things. There's a lot going on in the film, and it never quite satisfies in terms of a resolution of kind of coherence at the end. But yeah, really enjoyed it. I was worried because I was quite tired, and as I've been saying quite a lot, you know, it's been a strange week, so I was a bit apprehensive about not making it through. But yeah, the film is really good. I wonder what kind of release it'll have. I didn't know that. I was only when I was on Letterboxd I realised that Anne Fontaine has made kind of 18 movies, so she's, you know, an established director here in France, and this was an interesting movie. The performances are really good. The 3 main performances are really, really strong, and particularly Omar Sy stands out. Yeah, that was Nightshift, and yeah, so Rizi. What's been really interesting is thinking about film watching and coming to film festivals, and how I see films, and this idea of the festival bubble, and lots of things kind of percolating, because it's, part of me wonders if I just love it because I love his films, and the thrill of knowing that he was back after announcing his retirement after Stray Dogs is just so exciting that I can't see past that. Whether it's the bubble of you know, being at one of the world's major film festivals and having the privilege of a press screening and seeing it so gloriously presented, that again is swaying me towards thinking it's amazing. I don't know, and I think back to last year and how many of those films that I saw at Berlin I loved, and then sort of ended up in my kind of recollections at the end of the year as some of my favourites of the year, and all of them did. I think it was a really strong year last year, and I wonder if the same will be said this year. But certainly 2 or 3 things I've seen I think will stay with me. Maybe not as many as last year. But Days was funny because it was a really dreamlike experience. It's incredibly quiet, incredibly slow. Low key is a word that's come up a lot, sometimes in the negative, but I don't ever see it as a negative necessarily, and certainly not when a film is intending to be low key and quiet and contemplative. And this is even for Tsai Ming-Liang, it's very, very contemplative. There's hardly any dialogue. There's 2 or 3 lines of mumbled dialogue that are unsubtitled, and you're just spending time with 2 men, watching them live out their lives, and then they intersect and they drift away again, and it's astonishingly beautifully shot. Like, it is absolutely gorgeous to look at, but mostly because of Li Kangsheng as well. So Tsai's long-time collaborator as a leading man is just phenomenal, and I don't think anybody encapsulates sadness the way he does as an actor. I was talking to some of the students because they'd seen it yesterday and were perplexed by it, is the kind way of talking about it. Most of them absolutely hated the film because they've never seen anything like it, I don't think. And we talked really kind of constructively about what a film festival can do in terms of introducing you to different types of cinema. And I sort of said that what you're not watching someone act sad. So the opening shot is on Li Kangsheng in his apartment, staring out of a window, and it holds for what feels like an eternity. But you're not watching him act sad. You're watching sadness, and you're watching the being kind of emit sadness, and no one does it quite like Li Kangsheng. And it's excruciating, and it's beautiful, and it's hard to see someone so sad and so lonely. And then the film is just one of the most aching films about loneliness I think I've ever seen, and I didn't know how I felt about it after I'd seen it. I knew I'd liked it, but I didn't know how to feel about it. And then as the day progressed, it just kept flooding back to me in waves of emotion, and just the overwhelming sadness of the story of these 2 men, one younger, one older, and how lonely life can be, even surrounded by many people, even having contact with other people, how lonely it can be, and how utterly heartbreaking and kind of destructive that can be. And there's the payoff of the last sort of 20 minutes is, I just found it extraordinary to and I can't get the images out of my head of Li Kangsheng's character, and there's a kind of parallel shot that echoes the beginning of the movie, which is heartbreaking. And then there's when he meets the younger man, he gives him a gift, and then the final scene is the younger man with the gift, and I just found it overwhelming. And there's moments in the film where it's not slow and the edits are quite quicker, and particularly one amazing cut, which just kind of reminds you that you are with someone who is not just plonking a camera down and letting things happen. Like, there's a real method to what Tsai wants to show, where he wants the camera to be, how you engage with the characters in terms of their position in the frame, and in terms of how long those shots are, and you really feel the construction. And it's a guiding hand saying it's okay, this is meant to be like this, it's meaningful, and we're going to get somewhere really poignant. And remembering that Tsai Ming-Liang is had retired from kind of feature filmmaking, there was a sense of, why has he come back? And I talked about this earlier, you heard it earlier on the episode with Neil Young, like, after Stray Dogs, where is there to go? And this feels really personal. It felt like a story that was maybe inside him that he had to tell. I don't know if that's just the hyperbole of the moment with me, but it definitely felt like this was something that he needed to address and to say and to confront in this film. And it's the more I think about it, the more overwhelming it is. And and absolutely, it was a privilege to be in the room with the film and then to be in the room with him afterwards at the press conference. And just, it's a filmmaker that really means a lot to me, and particularly at a time when, you know, I am struggling to kind of deal on a day-to-day basis with things and to process a lot of stuff that's kind of going on in my professional and personal life. The honour of being presented that work in that way and being, you know, allowed to spend time with it and ponder it is kind of huge. And I really feel overwhelmed by it, and I think it's a film that is going to stay with me for a long, long time. And I'm glad that he came back and made it. So I think, just there's more talk there again of like my kind of processing of things at the moment, and it's my episode I think has been very different to Dario's. There's much less kind of engagement with other people. I have found it quite difficult this week to engage, you know, to be social, to kind of get out and do the work that I did last year on the podcast, and that Dario did so well in the first episode, and kind of get people's opinions and stuff. I've needed to see people that I know quite well and just hang out with them, and I feel very grateful for the kindness of people this week that I've met and the times I've spent with them, you know, without a microphone. It's felt very, very beneficial. Not great for podcast, obviously, when I'm just out hanging out, but hopefully you'll appreciate these little bits, and I appreciate your kindness in listening to the podcast and sort of sending such positive responses as you do. So thank you for listening. Not that this is the end, but this is the end of this bit. So I'm going to keep going on my walk to Potsdamer Platz, where my last film is The Sky Pilot, a late silent film by King Vidor, which is a retrospective here, and that'll be my last film before heading home. So hope to catch you soon. Just going to check my notebook. I've had it on my lap and then haven't checked it. Is there anything I want to say about Rizi that I have not said? Nothing that I won't probably bring up with Dario. Okay, alright, that'll do for now. I will catch you on the other side.
Okay, so that is it for our Berlinale specials you saw, because obviously you'd seen First Cow, which was the big talk, and you didn't see The Petzold, but then there were other movies that it looked like were the talk of the festival. How do you think it went generally?
I thought it was a good, solid festival. I was talking to Jason Wood and Mark Cosgrove. I saw at different points about it, and obviously they're coming from an exhibitor's point of view. And last year felt so extraordinary with Bait, but also things like The Souvenir. It didn't feel like there was necessarily, well, that's just a British thing, a spectacular a festival. You know, you had the final film by Vidor last year. I didn't see a bad film. I didn't see a film that I didn't like. But within that, there was probably only two that really, you know, I thought were kind of extraordinary, and that was First Cow and Days, Rizi, the Tsai Ming-Liang, which the more I think about it, the more I just think is a stone cold masterpiece. It's really haunting, like really, really deeply affecting. So, and the rest were good. Like I love the Hong Sangsoo, but you know, it's just a really, really good movie, and the rest were good. It was nice to see Siberia in the end, because that became a very divisive film.
So what did you make of that in terms of, you know, people really just like getting a bit annoyed about it and slagging it off big time, you know?
I don't know how much of that is a lack of awareness of Abel Ferrara, you know, not to assume they haven't, but, you know, I've stopped assuming that people know the filmographies of filmmakers now, you know, and that they've seen Driller Killer and Bad Lieutenant, you know, and if you've seen those films, it's it's no surprise. Or whether part of it is an understandable kind of tiredness of male auteurs, you know,
going off
kind
on
of just being self-indulgent and pretentious, and random and messy and stuff like. And both of those things I think are kind of valid if those are your entry points. But I think that there was a lot to admire in it. I think some of it was particularly beautiful, and some of it was taking the mickey, as I sort of said. But it felt like anything else. It didn't feel like anything else, certainly, that I saw in the competition, and that felt like was around the program. Something that was really out there. And I do think it was great to see it in a program that also had Hong Sangsoo, Tsai Ming-Liang, Kelly Reichardt, Eliza Hittman. I think that mix was really, really striking, and it certainly deserved to be there, I thought. And definitely the most interesting film he's made alongside Pasolini in the last 10 years, I'd say. Yeah, I liked Pasolini, actually. I mean, some people didn't, but yeah, and sort of Bad Lieutenant is just an incredible experience in many ways, which you could easily just really hate. And it's like, I've said it to you a million times before, it's like I love the idea that I'm the last person in a cinema that everybody else has walked out of. You know what I mean? I think that the idea of sort of watching films that are kind of mediocre, passable. We watch enough of those as it is, so something that really polarizes is great. And even with I do get that sense though that it was a similar thing maybe with the Gorel, and definitely with what happened last night at the Caesars with the Roman Polanski issue, if you want to call it that. That there is this sense that just the white male auteur just doing whatever they want and nobody asks any questions anymore is over, and I think that's totally fine. You know what I mean? That's the sort of why. With the Gorel as well. It's why is it in competition? Why does he just get to make that same film over and over again? But then when something comes out that you think, for example, with Abel Ferrara, that actually there is something in this, then that's fine as well. Still, I know. I know Polanski is a different kettle of fish. Which we all know. Yeah. Disclaimer. And I think that there are things that don't hit the mark, and there are things that kind of didn't like. But I don't think you could argue that he's not continuing a kind of a vein of kind of autobiographical searching and philosophical searching in the work. It was. I just think William Dafoe was so good in it, and whatever your point of view in terms of the filmmaking, I just don't think you can argue with him as a performer in terms of investing in it and being the conduit for the audience to get on board. I think it was another great performance from him. Yeah, so that was probably the one that I saw that probably you didn't. That I was really, and the Tsai Ming-Liang where I was, but what was interesting was more people walked out of that in the press screening than at the public screening of Siberia that I was at. There were a lot of walkouts at days. A lot of critics. I mean, it's towards the end of the festival. A lot of critics just kind of not on board with it, and even for him, it's slow. Do you know what I mean? Like, even for him, it really strips back to elemental faces, bodies, really long, really slow, no dialogue. It's
There's slow, and then there's Tsai Ming-Liang slow, and then now there is slower than that, which I don't know. There must be another word for glacial, maybe. Or something.
Glacial, yeah, nice. It was glacial, and then a huge kind of if that's how it felt at the end, it felt like when you see the kind of footage of an iceberg kind of breaking, and that's how it felt. It was this hugely overwhelming, or at least for me, kind of end. Yeah, nice metaphor.
So then at the end, you also saw the King Vidor.
Yeah, I saw the Sky Pilot, which was a 1921 silent movie. I saw that instead of seeing There Is No Evil, which was ended up being
on the mark again.
Yeah, kind of that won't do anything, and then ends up winning the Golden Bear, while I'm kind of over in Hollywood town. But yeah, it was so it was a recent restoration. It was playing part of the retrospective of King Vidor, and it had a live accompaniment by a pianist in the room, and it was just wonderful. It was just such a great end to the festival, and kind of had no idea going in what the result was going to be, but it was absolutely fantastic. It's the story of a preacher, a pastor, who kind of arrives in this very rowdy small town and wants to kind of bring religion to the kind of the cowhands. And there's also a plot with kind of a rogue landowner trying to steal some cows from another landowner. And the pastor befriends, after they have this incredible bar fight, it's absolutely with the kind of the foreman of the ranch, and they have this amazing fight in the bar and the foreman's like, yeah, this guy's okay kind of thing. And they form this friendship which is so intimate. Like it was extraordinary to see the tactility with and the closeness of these two men on screen, you know, and just how intimate they were, that how close their bodies were together, how friendly, how, you know, what would now be kind of called homoerotic, but it's such a closeness that it was striking, you know, but it was so beautiful. And at no point did you ever think it was kind of a subtext. It was just purely these two men love each other and are great friends. And then, you know, there's a woman in the middle, but not really in the middle. But an extraordinary kind of portrait of male friendship and intimacy that was absolutely fantastic. Colleen Moore plays the young woman who's kind of at the centre of it, and yeah, she's just absolutely phenomenal. And then it turns into this kind of Christmas movie. The last 30 minutes sort of sequence of it is all on Christmas Day, and it was so wonderful in the room because the pianist started with sort of moved into Good King Wenceslas on the kind of Christmas morning, which was just a lovely touch. But then what was just incredible was the way she evolved Wenceslas into dramatic, comedic, kind of romantic, melodies and kind of motifs throughout. I just thought this is fantastic, and you know, huge applause at the end for that, and just remarkable to watch someone improvise music for 80 minutes and just understand, you know, what's kind of going on. That was remarkable. So it was a really lovely, and had a shocking bridge scene where they kind of try and scare the pastor who's on this really, really high bridge going over a valley, and they essentially shoot him off the thing, and he's on a horse, and him and the horse tumble into the ravine, into the river, and both survive. But it's absolutely shocking, and the way it's cut is fantastic. Yeah, it was a great movie, and a nice end to the festival for me.
Fantastic. And yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you caught any of it, but I watched a little bit of the award ceremony.
I saw you tweeting along, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with awards, it could be anything really, couldn't it? I mean, it's funny though. I mean, the one feeling I had was that sense of, I know that a lot of talk around First Cow about winning Golden Bear, but you know, I didn't think that there was a sense in which that was so outstanding that it was just going to blow everything else away. And I think maybe that's what's happened to the festival as a whole, where you're saying it was solid rather than spectacular. And I think a lot of people are saying the same. And maybe as well, there was, not that it was a careful decision to give it to There Is No Evil, but it's definitely, it seems like it's taken into account the sort of context of that film and what it represents as much as the film itself. And we can't say anything about it because we haven't seen it. So, but again, I don't want to sort of do it down. It may be the masterpiece that we haven't seen. So, but an interesting choice in the way that has been articulated.
I think you know, judging from a little bit of the commentary, it seemed like a lot of critics missed it because of how late in the festival it played. It was literally the last morning of press screening. It was the last press screening. So I think a lot of people had already gone by then. So kind of a lot of people now curious to see it, I think, from that, which is great. And it definitely felt like that from the speech there was a sense of the almost a political decision, because the director obviously couldn't make it because he's not allowed to leave Iran, and it's almost unavoidable to watch Iranian cinema without politics,
Just look at Jafar Panahi as well, a similar.
And this director, I think, was first arrested working with Panahi, I read. So it's a reality of filmmaking life, isn't it, in Iran? So yeah, very curious to see it now. I think what I like about awards at the end of festivals is just more from a kind of curiosity point of view of like what do people see differently in terms of, and how does a jury kind of look at it, and you see Jeremy Irons at the head of the jury and Kenneth Lonergan's in there and stuff like that, and you just think like what are they looking for? Are they looking for politics? Are they looking for aesthetics? Are they, Not that those two can't, are all separate, but I think it's just interesting to see where people come down and see if the feelings that you have kind of marry up in any way, just out of curiosity. So seeing Hong Sang-soo win Best Director felt like it was inevitable after the famous cat scene, like how it just I can't think of a better scene or a more talked about scene at the festival, and a kind of moment of pure joy. And Eliza Hittman, I thought, would get something for that film. I thought that would be, kind of honoured in some way, because it felt like people were talking about it and recognised. Again, it's a political film, and a very, very current political film in terms of American politics. So, just curious really to see what people are kind of plumping for.
Yeah, and it was nice that, obviously I'd seen Udine, and I think, Paula Beer was great in it, in a film that, I just didn't think was quite as good as some of the other stuff I've seen of Petzold, even though, a lot of people liked it, and I liked it also, an interesting film. And other stuff like Bad Tales I hadn't seen, or Hidden Away I hadn't seen, which I would like to now. And then there was this, I think there was Dow Natasha was a film that I was just reading, actually was getting a little bit of, it had some outside criticism, I think, because of something to do with the production and Me Too and what have you. So, I think there's interesting elements coming out of the festival that are both to do with the films themselves, but also, and again, sort of reflecting the issue at the Caesars. There's definitely this sort of, when the discourse of film in relationship to the industry and to how it treats the personnel in the industry in terms of filmmaking, and then the historical abuses and all of that. All of that is still bearing into, I think, what you might call the kind of culture of awards and festivals.
It is, but they're still not taking the top prizes, which is so interesting. No. Like those juries are not, like last year, Angela Shanalek, kind of won Silver Bear maybe, or Best Director, but they're not winning. It's not winning the Golden Bear. There's still that top prize, which I just find fascinating that no one, that it's not coming out of the juries. Whether that's, I'd be fascinated to know those conversations, whether they feel any pressure to change that trajectory, because I think that there are more female filmmakers in competition now. It's harder to have less, obviously.
And how Portrait of a Lady on Fire didn't win the best French film, that is just beyond me. I'm sorry.
But again, it's it's the Green Book at the Oscars. People in that power, we will not be told what to do. There's a power that comes with jurying, and there's a power that comes with voting, that kind of takes over those things. And I think often critics, particularly, cause a problem for films through no fault of their own, but through absolutely loving them, which is what they should do, and really championing and saying this is the best film of the year, or this is a remarkable film, this is a masterpiece. But then, I think a lot of people just don't want to be told, well, I'm going to go in and disagree, or I'm not going to award it, or that, well, it doesn't need our help. I think there's so many factors that come into play but the result is always the same, that you see a film and think, how did 10 people not see the same thing who are supposed to be film people? It's fascinating, isn't it?
It is. And just to close, I think, maybe summing up thoughts on the festival. I mean, just again, it's great to have the privilege to be able to go to the Berlin Film Festival. Living in London, I do go to various, individualized events, and then obviously the London Film Festival when it's on. But just going out to Berlin, being in the city is just absolutely wonderful. And the time of year is always just perfect to kind of get out of town and go. And, I did feel like, interestingly, in the sort of bubble of the festival, whereas more in previous years, I've just felt like I was, an autonomous being about town, as it were, which was an interesting difference. But those of you who are Patreon subscribers, you'll read. I've written a little bit about defending the spaces for creative practice and creative thought, and sort of that the importance of giving art and culture its due as to why it's still important in all of our lives. Not just, I mean, and it's really easy to be sort of pretentious and high-minded about that, or B, dismiss it as, we're only just, going on about films. But I think it's the way that things are going. The sort of instrumentalization of culture, and I talk a little bit about the university and the strike that's going on, and it all seems to be connected up in this move towards only things that are important they have to be economically valuable or have an instrumental underpinning to them. You talking on about films or creating your podcast or whatever it is you want to do as your expression of yourself or your dedication to knowledge or communication or any of these things, however you want to couch it. These things are just frivolous in this day and age, and it's not right. And it needs to be, that space for curiosity and creativity needs to be fought for.
Agreed. A good place to end, I think. Can't really add anything onto that. I concur wholeheartedly. So with that in mind, I guess we should wrap it up. So this has been, the second half, the second part of our Berlinale special for 2020. It was really nice to be press with you and kind of, to experience a couple of press screenings with you and, just get a full day really to kind of, like you say, feeling part of the kind of the cultural whirlwind that is the Berlinale. And hopefully people will have enjoyed our kind of missives and our kind of thoughts on the festival. Thanks to the Patreon subscribers whose contribution helped us kind of get the accreditation as well, which is really, really helpful to kind of bring you these episodes.
And thanks to all the contributors over the 2 episodes.
Thanks to everyone who kind of shared their time with us. Really, 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 really grateful. And we'll be back soon with... Is it finally going to be the voice episode, Dario? That's what everyone wants to know. Is it going to happen?
I'm working on it to a finish this week, so I'm hoping that's going to be the next one. If it isn't, it'll either be that or the Blake Howard episode.
Oh yeah, all the President's Men.
All the
President's Minutes.
But a couple of episodes to go till our 100th. But the voice is either the next one or the one after. But it's definitely nearly there. You've
been teasing us for months. We're all very excited.
Yeah, it's just terrible of me. I'm such a tease.
Cool. Well, thanks for a great time in Berlin. Check us out on all the usual places, all of our socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Email us, cinematologist@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you, Dario.
Thank you. It's been great.
It has been great. This has been the Cinematologist Podcast. Thanks for listening.